Welcome everybody to the Structural Engineering Emergency Response, or SEER, track for the committee engagement. I am David Troxel, one of the co-chairs. We also have Colby Baker. He is the other co-chair. Colby's from North Carolina. I'm from Arizona. And just get you a little bit of introductory information about the SEER committee. This slide is just a copy of what's already on our webpage on the NCSEA website, but SEER committee is here to provide education, facilitate education and training of post-disaster building evaluators. Our goal is to train people, keep people ready to be engaged by local communities, which could be emergency managers, building officials, in response to some sort of incident, whether that's a natural disaster, hurricane, earthquake, it could be an explosion, terrorist event, things like that, providing post-disaster building assessment, going in and analyzing and assessing buildings for safety in order to get people back into their houses, back into their businesses as quickly as possible. That helps facilitate recovery of the community. The longer that takes, it just adds more hurdles, adds more time, and delays that recovery process. We are here to promote the engagement of our disaster training evaluators, and one of our main goals is just to advocate for ourselves, get the word out to emergency managers, building officials, people in the states, and we do that through our regional coordinators, and we do that through our state member organizations as well. We also host, along with the International Code Council, a database of trained individuals through the Disaster Response Alliance. That's a website, and I'll show you a little bit more in a little bit here. Some of our accomplishments from last calendar year: we had some of our committee members qualified to train one of the nationally standardized training courses, which is California's Office of Emergency Management, their SAP coordinator class. And those two committee members also provided a NCSEA webinar in the fall to train people. So we are encouraging our own to provide that training to NCSEA, and that has been very successful. And there's another webinar coming up here in May, so I look forward to that. If you are interested at the end of this, or you want more information, that will be coming up here in May. We also had a subcommittee of the Minnesota member organization create a list of state-by-state liability for post-disaster assessors. That seems to be the biggest hurdle for most engineers, or the biggest question is what's my liability if I'm volunteering my time to go out to analyze and assess buildings for damage. We continue to advocate for awareness of our training to building officials, emergency managers, and other stakeholders nationwide. We continue to provide Cal OES SAP training, and International Code Council, ICC, has their own class when disaster strikes, and we continue to either present those classes or coordinate participation of those, or putting those on from locally and nationally. And then we continue to host the Disaster Response Alliance website, as I previously mentioned. And again, that's in partnership with NCSEA and the International Code Council. And you can see the website located here. So that's just a database of trained individuals, so that we can use that to query that, to find trained individuals by zip code, by state, qualifications. We use that to notify people when we think potential deployment opportunities are coming up. And if you look in the chat, Susan has posted some of the resources for SEER, and she has posted a link for the May Cal OES training as well. Some of our goals for this calendar year are improve the functionality of the Disaster Response Alliance database. We want to make it more functional, query more fields, store information, upload and track certificates and trainings, be able to communicate directly through that. We want to expand our partnership with that to include some other member professional organizations, AIA, ASCE. We continue to get some of our member organization SEER committees to adopt it as their roster management. I think most states are just have a spreadsheet of lists and information. I'm trying to standardize that and get more people involved to use that, get more states to use it, and educate and promote people about it. And our ultimate end user are building officials and emergency managers. All the engineers, code officials, anybody who's deployable, who has this training as a resource. And we want the people who are calling on those resources to know what's available and how to get them. Looking to establish some more SEER DRA programs in the states without existing SEER programs. So if you're on here and you're a state and you do not have a SEER program, or some of the states maybe don't even have just member organizations as well. So again, we can ask questions about that. We're working to develop some standard memorandum of understanding language templates for different states to be able to use to set up arrangements and agreements with emergency managers. This goes back to some of the liability questions, and have that everything in writing ahead of time. So when it's time to be deployed, we don't have anything to figure out. We continue to present through webinars, in person, again, just advocating for ourselves. We continue to provide training for Cal OES and ICC when disaster strikes, and looking to create a concept of operation documents for some of our users. So that's a quick introduction. I know there's usually generates lots of questions, but those are some of our accomplishments and some of our goals. Colby, is there anything you want to add to general information to everybody before we open it up for questions?
I guess another thing I'd like to put out there is we are looking for folks who are interested in SEER and interested in getting more involved. We do have several openings for state level SEER coordinators in maybe a dozen states, 9 to 12 states here. So if you're interested in getting more involved, we probably have a good opportunity for you somewhere in there. I'd sure love to talk to you. That's it.
So if you have any questions, if you want to you just put them in the chat and we can respond to those. I see one from Jordan. He says he's an EIT looking to get involved in NCSEA committee. So Jordan, you're in Idaho. Let me see if I can. These are our regions. You see the map here. I'd have to look and see who our Idaho connection is, but the first
Sarah
step,
McClendon is our Idaho connection.
So we can put you in touch with Sarah. I think the first step would be to get involved with your state chapter and get involved in their SEER committee, or we can, so we'll put you in touch with Sarah and you can start asking her some questions and see if there's opportunities to get involved. I think most of our state organizations have a SEER committee in the state. I encourage you to get involved in there as well.
The other thing that I'd like to add, David, I know that Jordan's at EIT, and it's kind of a good opportunity to get involved as an EIT, especially because with the recent FEMA resource typing, it allows EITs to be involved in post-disaster safety assessment, which it did not before. So it's an opportunity. There may be an opportunity there to actually, get some real good hands-on post-disaster experience before getting your PE license, which is a really great opportunity. I think probably the first step is trying to take a disaster responder course like the California Office of Emergency Services Safety Assessment Program, their SAP class, or ICC's When Disaster Strikes Institute are good opportunities to get that basic training to be a post-disaster safety assessor.
That sounds good. And there's links to those trainings on the NCSEA website, or?
There is, and Susan has posted those in the chat as well. So I think the May webinar for Cal OES that NCSEA is going to be hosting, they've revamped the fee structure. So for just an individual, it's very economical. So I'd encourage you, if you're interested, to participate in that. I know you were asking about like time commitment. It's going to vary depending on the committee, but it isn't necessarily a huge commitment. I think there might be more up front to get your training and, kind of get your feet wet and get understanding. But, kind of beyond that is just the involvement level of maybe the state SEER committee. And then, from a training, continuing education standpoint, there really isn't much. Once you have your Cal OES training, that's renewed every 5 years. So it just depends on your involvement. See a comment.
I did just get a question, if I can interject real quick. I just got a question about whether Cal OES SAP accepts non-PEs into taking their class. And the answer to that is yes, anyone can take their disaster responder course. However, they won't make you a certified second responder in California. You'll get credit for having taken the class, but you won't get on California's roster. That's the only problem there.
And along those lines, to respond to your comment, Mark, about EITs, they're not out there by themselves. So the way FEMA has things set up is in teams, and there's certain levels of training that are required. So somebody with EIT level can still get some participation and be involved, but they're not ultimately responsible.
Yeah, the EITs would be paired with a more experienced professional as part of a team doing post-disaster building safety assessment.
So David mentioned that some SEER activities are coordinated through local AIA chapters. So that's good. That's kind of what we're working for, is just to have uniformity in what everybody's doing. So we're all kind of doing the same thing. So that's maybe another opportunity for you to look through. If there isn't a specific SEER chapter through NCSEA, through your state, you look in your AIA chapters as well. Another question about ATC 20 and 45 training. Yes, that is acceptable. All the other trainings are based on those. So Cal OES is based on ATC 20 and 45. ICC When Disaster Strikes is based on ATC 20 and 45. So as long as you have that, that's the minimum. that's recognized.
I should add there, David, that that is going to be dependent on the state, exactly what their requirements are. Like California obviously requires their SAP, and other states may just require ATC 20 or ATC 45. Specifically with the FEMA resource typing, it's written such that it needs to include training on ATC 20 and ATC 45, as well as additional concepts of operations training, which right now is fairly vague, but generally that includes California SAP program, ICC's when disaster strikes, the Missouri SAVE program, the WAS SAFE program in Washington, and basically anything that includes ATC 20 and 45 with a little bit of additional information for responders, in addition to the mechanics of doing a safety assessment.
Any other questions? You can either add them in the chat or you can unmute yourself and ask it directly as well.
Or feel free to share any experiences you've had if you've been a second responder or participated in trainings.
I will say I did get a chance this past fall to do a deployment myself. You may or may not remember that we had an earthquake here in North Carolina. You may or may not believe it, but we did. And it affected quite a number of buildings. I would say we had, let's see, we had maybe 4 different teams working on and off over the course of the week to do evaluate more than 400 structures. Mostly residential structures, some light commercial structures, some municipal buildings. It was a lot of damage to residential foundations, unreinforced concrete block foundations. No surprise there. What was particularly interesting is while we were up there, we had a PhD student from a university in Tennessee who was actually digging out the fault so that he could get a look at the soil profile through the fault. We actually got down in the ditch and took a look at it. It was pretty interesting. You could actually see the soil layer, where the soil layers had shifted.
Colby, this is Patrick Murrin from South Carolina here.
Hey, Patrick.
Hey, all right. With that deployment, was that part of a statewide disaster service worker call out? Or was that part of a local jurisdiction requesting volunteers? Just curious about the mechanics of how SEER got involved in that deployment.
So actually that was not directly through SEER. So we have in North Carolina, we have a couple different systems. We have our first responders, basically, which is our structural engineers who have been trained to respond to active collapse incidents where people might be trapped and they need to provide structural engineering support to the rescuers. And then we have the second responders, which is basically SEER. Both systems kind of run through the state, but the second responders are volunteers and the first responders are paid on call, essentially. So in this particular instance, the local jurisdiction, Sparta, North Carolina, reached out to the state emergency management, requested second responder resources, and rather than reaching out to SEER, they reached out to the first responder team to send engineers up there. So the work was second responder work being done by first responder trained engineers.
When you're saying first responder, is that equivalent to like a FEMA task force or?
Very much equivalent to a FEMA task force, except instead of sending a task force, they were just sending the engineering component of the task force.
I follow you.
We actually kind of have an interesting system as far as the first responders go, in that we have, in most states, you have engineers who are teamed up with, associated with a particular task force in the state. In our case, we have 15 engineers who are trained, but are not associated with a specific task force. Instead, we are a strike team directly under North Carolina Emergency Management. So in that case, any one of those 15 engineers could be sent anywhere in the state, depending on whether they're available and how many engineers they need. But the nice thing is, you know, if a normal task force is trying to respond somewhere, they're hoping that their 2 engineers are going to be available, which, you know, they may not. Maybe they're traveling, maybe they're just not available. In this case, we have a bench that's 15 people deep, and it's a little more reliable.
Yeah, it's an interesting setup. It's raising a number of questions. Maybe I'll have to reach out to you separately. We're kind of looking to get off the ground here in South Carolina, and yeah, I'd be curious to pick your brain as far as you know, as we have that, I guess, that freedom right now of how we want to set things up, and kind of weigh the pluses and minuses of you know, working through its emergency management versus that, like I said, that kind of like that strike force, 15-person strong kind of strike force seems like an interesting concept. So I'll reach out to you separately, but yeah, it's raising
absolutely.
a number of questions in my head.
And you have
Thank
your second responder is kind of ironed out already, really, in South Carolina with the state guard, right?
Well, that's what's still a little nebulous. It's in our mind right now, is trying to really hammer out an agreement, because I think it's I frankly, I just moved here last year. It's working with our SEA here. It sounds like that arrangement is it's worked, but it's a little suboptimal, where it's difficult to get engineers. I guess the way it's operated in the past is we're kind of a wing of the National Guard and being deployed with that, and that hasn't been totally optimal for the engineers. So it's we're working on how we want to constitute that here, or reconstitute it as needed.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll have a discussion about it.
Yep.
Richard, to respond to your statement in the chat, well, I'm not sure. We'll reach out to Florida. I know a lot of people are on rosters, but it just depends on how people get deployed, whether that's you know, state by state, within the state, different agreements going out of state, state to state sharing of resources, and some changes in FEMA language and resource typing has revised some of that. So you might still be on a SEER roster. I would encourage you maybe get in touch with you know, anyone on the SEER committee for Florida SEA, and just reach out to them if you're not involved, and maybe see how you can get involved, and maybe you can see what their roster looks like.
Brett Rylands is our SEER chair in Florida.
Any other questions?
I guess I'd be interested if Richard's gotten any emails from us, because we have sent, with some of the hurricanes, basically each of the hurricanes each year, we send out some sort of correspondence requesting people to update their information. So I'd be curious if Richard at least got those emails.
Richard, I don't see you on our Disaster Response Alliance, so I'm not sure. Maybe Florida has their own SEER roster. If you have some training and you said you're on a USAR team, if you go to disasterresponse.org, which if you go up in the chat, Susan already posted that website, disasterresponse.org, and you can go there and you can enter your information in there. And that would put you on our NCSEA ICC list. Same to you, I think Amit. Yeah, Susan just posted that again. So if you want to go on there, you can. You have, ATC 20, ATC 45, Cal OES, or ICE. Any other of these trainings, you can go in there and enter your information.
Hi, my name's Tiffany. My apologies for joining late. So I'm not sure if you covered this already or not, but I'm actually a bridge structural engineer, and I was curious how the response differs, if there's some way to indicate that I have infrastructure experience, or if teams are just kind of sent out whoever, we just take structural engineers to inspect whatever, whether it's a building or a bridge, or if there is some kind of further distinction there.
I don't think there's a distinction right now. Most of the SEER stuff is building related. If you get into maybe some of the urban search and rescue stuff, I know we get into, might need to look at bridges at that standpoint, but my understanding is maybe, at least it may vary from state to state too, but at least I'm from Arizona, and most of that, our bridge work is handled separately by the Department of Transportation. But it wouldn't prevent you, encourage you, if you have some of these other, to maybe get some of these disaster trainings, Cal OES or ICC when disaster strikes, you can still get trained and get involved.
I have Cal OES, so I'll definitely sign up on disasterresponse.org. Yeah.
And
if you sign up on disasterresponse.org, we do have a number of radio buttons on there to list your experience, and bridges is one of them. So we do document that on our roster in case a jurisdiction requesting help has a specific need for your expertise, that they'll be able to capture that.
Awesome. Thanks.
Again, there are lots of links in the chat. There are also on the NCSEA website under resources, there is a whole page on emergency response that has some additional information. Colby and David, I've put your committee page in the chat as well. Their email links are there. Feel free to reach out to them individually. Otherwise, I think we're butting up against time. So on behalf of NCSEA, I'd like to thank David and Colby for this. And please feel free to reach out with any SEER related questions. We are having a Cal OES training in May. So if you're interested, please sign up.
Thanks for attending.